In this video, we will talk about lexical quality, in particular, the lexical quality hypothesis, which is a theoretical approach to reading. As we have previously seen, the result of reading experience is a representation of orthographic word forms, phonological word forms, and the corresponding word meanings, all tightly interconnected for the words one knows in one's mental lexicon. Focusing on these representations of words, this means that each word that you know has one of these sets. The lexical quality hypothesis posits that these representations will differ in quality in specific ways as a result of reading experience, and therefore will also support to different extent adequate reading comprehension. As we've already seen, to become a skilled reader, one must learn and develop many things. First of all, recognition and segmentation of graphemes in words that you look at is necessary. Then mapping graphemes to phonemes, developing a sight word vocabulary with the frequent letter sequences that you've encountered, which are your known words. Building connections between meaning, spelling, and speech, and allowing these connections to interactively activate each representation based on the others, so that they can support rapid and effective understanding. The mental lexicon then develops as the point of convergence between representations for oral and written language that both point to the same meanings. Note that in this description, we have already encountered the idea of connections between three different aspects of each word, and the potential for interactive processing by which each of these can activate the others. So then the question is, what are the properties of these representations that are enabling or hindering reading comprehension? And the questions we can ask are first about the representations themselves before moving on to the connections. So are these representations stable, strong, distinct, and detailed? Or are they unstable, faint, confusable, and coarse? This means whether the information that is represented is stable so that it doesn't change very easily, is strong so that it can activate enough to be retrieved without much effort, is different for each word so that you do not confuse the words, and is detailed enough to have rich information so that you actually know a lot about this word's role in each passage and its implications. Turning to the connections, we can ask whether the connections are strong, multiple, redundant, and bidirectional, or weak, few, scarce, and directional. Strong connections will allow one of the representations to rapidly activate the others. Multiple connections will achieve the same purpose. And they can be multiple different connections between different aspects of the representations, or they can be multiple redundant connections so that you have many connections for the exact same set of properties, which allows strong and rapid retrieval even if one connection falters at some point. Bidirectional means that you can go from each of these representations to each of the others, not having to go through the third one. So you can go from orthographic forms directly to meanings and from meanings to orthographic forms, which means that representations can rapidly and effectively activate the other parts of the same lexical item. So the notion of lexical quality concerns exactly these properties. The hypothesis that lexical representations differ in quality focuses on the importance of knowing words for being able to read effectively and efficiently. Strong knowledge of orthographic forms and strong connection to their phonological forms and meanings allows for rapid word recognition and rapid access to the word's meaning for understanding. Emphasizing this tight interconnectedness between aspects of the word's representation highlights the strong link between vocabulary and comprehension that we already know is seen in the data. The lexical quality hypothesis posits specific attributes of what it means to know a word well, which include the idea that each word has to be sufficiently distinct so that it's not confusable with other words. Its representations have to be rich, having detail, and distinguishing between different meanings and different contexts. Knowing a word well is associated with rich knowledge stored in the representation, which is otherwise known as depth of vocabulary knowledge. And strongly connected representations is also an aspect of knowing a word well, of having a high quality lexical representation, because that allows us to go efficiently from one form to the other and to the meaning. So if one knows a word well, that is, if one has a high quality representation of a word, this means that the word representations can be activated very quickly and easily without effort, that they are stable and do not fluctuate and are not confused with other words, that access to the word's forms and meanings is accurate, and that you can get all the necessary information for fully spelling a word that you know. And this is a very important point. Maybe pause the video, take a breath before we go on. Okay, here is the thing that is often misunderstood by beginners. In one's mind, words are not all the same. Not every word has the same quality. That is not possible because quality builds with reading experience. So there are relatively few frequent words that you have more experience with, and very many rare words that you have very little experience with. The richness of a representation depends on the number and the diversity of contexts in which you have encountered a word. And the connections between the different representations depends on how many opportunities you've had to strengthen them, which is also related to the number of encounters. So the lexical quality of frequent words will necessarily be much higher than the lexical quality of rare words for any reader, whether that is a skilled reader or someone with reading difficulty. Skilled readers have many high-quality lexical representations. They cannot have only high-quality lexical representations because they will necessarily have low-quality lexical representations for infrequent words that they have not encountered enough times to strengthen and to bring to a high quality. But still, they will have many more high-quality lexical representations than less skilled readers. This is because reading experience is what strengthens the connections and what enriches the representations. An experience with diverse contexts, that is, different kinds of passages and different senses of the same word, is what can lead to the distinct representation for the different meanings. In turn, high-quality lexical representations enable rapid access to the correct meaning, which underlies rapid, effortless reading with good comprehension. In other words, it is the high-quality lexical representation that allows the skilled reader to read skillfully, to read fluently with understanding. So one builds high-quality lexical representations by reading experience, and in turn, the high-quality lexical representations contribute to an enriched and more effective reading in the future. In contrast, less skilled readers have relatively few high-quality lexical representations. Because they read less well and less effectively, they have fewer opportunities to strengthen connections and enrich their representations. And in turn, the poor quality lexical representations are not strong enough to support effortless and effective reading with good fluency and good understanding, which is what we see in someone who is not a skilled reader. How is the lexical quality hypothesis related to the simple view of reading? Both are mainly concerned with understanding variability in reading comprehension. So what is it that makes some people good reading comprehenders and others not so? How does that develop in children? Why does that differ in children? And how is that influenced by reading experience and influencing subsequent reading experience? So both of these approaches concern similar questions. However, there is very different emphasis. As we've seen, the simple view of reading is built on the distinction between two kinds of processing and emphasizes that there are two partially separable dimensions in reading comprehension. So the separability is what defines the simple view. In contrast, lexical quality does not emphasize the separability, but instead emphasizes the overlap, what is common about these aspects and what connects them. These are not directly contradictory, but rather a difference in emphasis. The simple view does not state that comprehension processes are entirely unrelated to print-dependent decoding processes. It says they're partially separable. So one approach chooses to focus on the separability and the other chooses to focus on the common part. In addition, one focuses on how the words are represented in the mind, whereas the other one focuses on the two kinds of skills that are involved. In the end, both of these theoretical approaches are very important. They are well supported by evidence in their domains of emphasis, and both provide very useful ways to think about and understand what underlies reading comprehension in terms of processes, representations, and the origins of potential difficulties.